The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're very pleased to have the Senate Majority Leader with us today, Senator Tommy Norment. Good to see you again.
Woody, it's good to be back with you. You're looking quite mature with that growth on your face there, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Tell us about your district. Speaking of maturing, your district has changed over the last 24 years.
It's been an interesting morphing. I have to thank my good Democratic friends who controlled the redistricting in the Senate the last time around. I euphemistically say they were very kind to give me the opportunity to make a lot of new friends. I went from representing a fairly compact district into representing a extended district that runs literally almost from the North Carolina line, just a little bit south of Suffolk, to almost the Richmond city limits in King William County. So I've met a lot of very nice people, made a lot of new friends, maybe a few new enemies, but that's to be expected in this business. But I represent part of James City County, part of York County, Gloucester, New Kent, King William, King and Queen. You jump across the James River. I have one precinct in Surrey. Proud to say I only have one registered voter there.
One.
And I called him up and said, please vote for me. I've never gotten 100% of the vote in any precinct. So he was very kind and went to the polls, and I swept it. Also, I've got part of Isle of Wight, part of Smithfield, part of Suffolk. So it's a fairly extended district, but a lot of very nice people, and it does make it a little more challenging just because of the geographical disbursement of it.
Now, what about the community of interest? You use the term compact. Community of interest is another term that's used in a different context, as is contiguous. Talk to us about those elements.
There are certain constitutional guidelines that the United States Supreme Court has said must be considered during redistricting. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of confusion. One of the acceptable considerations in redistricting is politics. It is an acceptable criteria. But there are other things like compactness, which suggest that it ought to be reasonably concise and brought together. I guess probably Congressman Bobby Scott's district and the district I represent defy compactness. Contiguous means that the areas you represent are supposed to be touching one another. I learned what contiguous meant when I was elected in 1991. The Eastern Shore was contiguous to Williamsburg. As I tried to figure that out, I came to appreciate that bodies of water do not interrupt contiguousness. So that's there as well. Community of interest. Oh my gosh, I left out my friends in Hampton. I represent part of Hampton as well. And the reason Hampton came to my mind about community of interest, in theory, you would not want to take a highly metropolitan area and put that in the same district with a very rural area. I have the interesting opportunity of representing downtown Hampton, which is a very different community than the 6,200 people in King William County, which is a rural-based county. And sometimes you get into significant conflicts of interest. Blessedly, I missed this one. A few years ago, the peninsula areas were looking for future water sources. They were contemplating building a reservoir in King William County that would have supplied water to the lower peninsula. King William was adamantly against it. A lot of the Native Americans were outraged about the trespassing and committing a sacrilege on some of their sacred lands. And I just was so blessed that I wasn't representing King William and Hampton at that time, because I probably would have been on the guillotine block.
Now, you've got about 200,000 constituents. How have they and your district fared economically over the past 5 or 6 years?
Well, like a lot of areas in Virginia, we've had mixed impacts on the 3rd Senatorial District that I'm privileged to represent. We have a fairly significant dependence on Department of Defense dollars. With sequestration and the President's direction of cutting down spending on the military, there's been a pretty significant impact there. We were very hopeful when there was an expansion of Fort Eustis, and TRADOC from Fort Monroe was moved over there. Also, we have Langley Air Force Base in the immediate area, but there's been a drawdown on some of those troops and airmen, which we're concerned about. I don't represent Norfolk, but there's been a redeployment of some of the ships that were stationed in Norfolk. When you pull one of those aircraft carriers out and move it to Mayfield, Florida or somewhere, that can be anywhere from 3,500 to 5,000 sailors. That doesn't include their family members and all of the economic impact on it. Tourism has slipped a little bit in the historic triangle as a result of the recession. People have become more conscious and conservative in their spending habits, and so I think they've cut back maybe on the number of trips and the duration of trips that they have taken. But as far as our other base of operations and economics there, have done pretty well. The shipyard struggles on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they secure the contracts for future building of ships, and they've been increasing their workforce, so that's really encouraging. So it's really a mixed bag. I think the more rural counties of New Kent and King William and King and Queen have been fairly stable, because they're more of an agricultural based economy, so they really haven't been the significant dips. New Kent was hurt a little bit when Colonial Downs shut down. The license was turned in there as a result of a dispute with the horsemen that displaced roughly 350 seasonal workers. Also, New Kent gets some money from the off-track betting facilities because they provide services to the track, such as fire and police and that type of thing. So New Kent has felt a little bit of a pinch as a result of the surrendering of the license by Colonial Downs. Hopefully I have mediated a settlement between the horsemen and Colonial Downs, and the racing season will be resumed in 2015, and those jobs will be recovered, and New Kent will start to receive those tax resources and the distribution from the OTB again. So it's been a mixed bag.
Now, how have your colleges, universities, and community colleges fared?
Terrific, terrific. As you know, I am a fearless champion of higher education in Virginia. Both Christopher Newport's applications in Newport News are up. They have a very vibrant student body there. President Tribble's done a wonderful job in transforming that university. The College of William & Mary, its applications are up, I think, for the 11th or 12th straight year. I continue to teach in the undergraduate and law school there, so I interact with these students on a frequent basis. The students that are coming into William & Mary are extraordinary, just extraordinary young people. Their intellectual curiosity never ceases to amaze me. President Taylor Reevely has provided some very steady leadership there. He's also provided a great vision. He did an innovative approach on tuition. I think any of us that have ever had our children go to college, we have that uneasiness about what the Board of Visitors is going to do the next year in setting the tuition. There's no predictability. President Reevely crafted, along with the Board of Visitors, what he calls the William & Mary Promise. The incoming freshmen this year had basically a contract that said, this is what your tuition is going to be for 4 years. So parents, loan companies, whoever happens to finance those educational pursuits have some predictability. That's really doing well. Our community colleges are doing terrific. Thomas Nelson continues to be a very vibrant member of our community, providing the 2-year education. Students can either get a certificate to go into a trade that they pursued, or if they maintain a B average, they're guaranteed. Guaranteed admission to any public college and university in Virginia. Rappahannock Community College continues to meet needs in that area. Higher education is doing well, but they have an insatiable appetite, like everyone else, for additional funding. Our faculty and classified workers are woefully underpaid. The amount of money that the state is putting into higher education has been declining, and so that remains a concern because it puts pressure on tuition and fees to make up what the escalating costs are.
Now, that 4-year agreement that you spoke about is very similar to some legislation that was introduced, a flat fee arrangement, if you will. The institution of higher learning commits to a flat fee for 4 years. The student agrees to finish his or her studies within that 4-year period. And there's also another bill, I believe, that would cap expenses, especially as that relates to non-academic ventures. I'm sure you've been involved in shepherding that legislation through the Senate.
Well, we just had crossover yesterday, so the bills from the House of Delegates are just starting to be considered by the Senate today. Delegate Cox has a bill dealing with trying to cap the fees that are related to intercollegiate athletics. Tremendous pressures in every institution of higher learning on trying to contain costs, because costs can also translate into accessibility to the colleges and universities. The Senate took a little different approach on some ways to address that. We have, in our budget, have put more money into need-based financial aid, which I'm a real advocate of. Delegate Cox is seeking to try to contain the amount of fees that students are charged that are attributable to intercollegiate athletics. If one were to examine the percentage of fees that are charged for athletics, it varies remarkably from Virginia Tech, I believe, being the lowest, to Longwood being the highest. And of course you have Virginia Tech and UVA that have extraordinary athletic programs. So when they're on TV or go to bowl games, they are bringing revenues in which drive down the cost. Some of your other schools, Longwood, VMI, Radford, William & Mary, they don't go to many bowl games, and they're not on ESPN on Tuesday night. So there's a wide difference. But I share that concern with Delegate Cox. Let me say that I really do share it. So I think we'll continue to move in that regard. I think it's wonderful to incentivize students to complete their degree in 4 years. Sometimes that doesn't work in spite of the best plans. I know that when my daughters were in college, my youngest one went to University of Virginia. She's a lot smarter than I am, so. And University of Virginia wants you to complete your degree in 4 years, and they incentivize you in other ways. On the other hand, my oldest daughter went to James Madison University, and at that time it was challenging to get out in 4 years, not because the students were lollygagging around. It was because of the accessibility of courses that they needed. JMU and other public colleges and universities have addressed that. But then you've got some other extremes. There's some real challenges with our historical black colleges. Norfolk State is well known about the issues that they're having down there. President Moore is doing his absolutely best to turn that situation around, but their graduation rate, their default rate on student loans is pretty significant, so that's a work in progress. So a lot of it's institutional specific.
Talk to us about the opportunities for veterans in the Commonwealth and in your district in terms of education, workforce development, encouraging them to become entrepreneurs as they return from theaters of war.
Well, Woody, you and I come from a different generation than veterans today. When I came out of VMI, that school was producing second lieutenants with the expectation to go to Vietnam. Our servicemen at that point in time in the late 60s and early 70s were vilified, disrespected, no compassion. It was really, I think, a dark time in the history of the military in the United States. Contrast that with where we are in 2015. The enormous outpouring of respect, sensitivity, concern about medical care, post-traumatic stress syndrome, integrating our veterans into the workforce. It really heartens me. I remember a few years ago, I was up in Maine duck hunting and was in the Bangor airport. And I saw all of these veterans from the American Legion, the veterans of foreign wars were there, and they had flags, and they had set up tables with nibbles. They had hundreds of cell phones because some of the troops coming back from the Middle East, Bangor was a stop-off point.
Right.
And so when they got off the plane there, all of these people from Bangor pouring out, welcome them. Here's a cell phone. Call your loved one. Here's a cup of coffee. They had young students there singing patriotic songs. I mean, it really, literally brought tears to my eyes because in the 60s I was crying for a different reason. But there are great opportunities now and focus on our veterans. We have a lot of workforce transition programs that are set up in our community college systems. Some of our major corporate citizens are doing terrific jobs. Tom Farrell over at Dominion Virginia Power has set up a VETS program where they are actively soliciting and seeking veterans to come to work in various capacities at Dominion Virginia Power. They've been a national leader on that program, and a number of our other companies in Virginia have picked it up. So I'm really encouraged, and of course the GI Bill is still there. We've done an awful lot in being the son of a dad who survived the first day of D-Day. I'm very sensitive to those issues.
And I understand the budget includes funding for a couple of new veteran service centers, one in the Hampton Roads area, the other one in Northern Virginia.
Absolutely. That's some legislation that I'm confident is going to be successful for new VA centers in both Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia. The only ongoing discussion is how we're going to pay for them. We will pay for them. It's just a question of how we will do it. The Senate has suggested that we do it with bonded indebtedness. The House has a little different approach, but there is no debate as to whether or not those centers will be built. Virginia has been working in recent years to make itself more friendly to our veterans. I mean, we are second only to California in the amount of Department of Defense dollars we receive on a per capita basis, and Virginia has been trying to make certain that veterans appreciate Virginia is receptive and wants them to remain as permanent citizens in the Commonwealth.
Now, besides your responsibilities as the Senate Majority Leader, you serve on 5 committees, I believe, one of which you chair, and that's the Courts of Justice Committee. Talk to us about those committees in conjunction with your responsibilities as the Senate Majority Leader.
Well, Woody, I've learned that all of those titles, whether it's Senator, Majority Leader, Minority Leader, and $2 won't even get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So that's all very nice, but I'm pretty much known as Tommy, and that's who I am. I don't believe my own press clippings, and I don't believe the press clippings that other people write either. I've been very blessed over the 24 years. I've been fortunate and I've been persistent. I co-chair the Courts of Justice Committee now with Senator Mark Obenchain. I was very pleased he was willing to do that with me. I had previously chaired it alone, but the responsibilities of trying to keep legislation moving, to provide some leadership to the 21 Republican senators, to work on the budget of just the allocation of time was getting very difficult. So Mark Obenchain is really doing a great job in helping me on that. We rotate. He does it one day during the week, and I do it the other, and that's been a terrific help. And it's gotten Mark engaged, which is a good thing. Where a lot of my time really is going, even though I'm on the 5 committees, a lot of my time is spent on the budget. I do expect that I'll be a budget conferee again this year. And of course, the budget conferee is when the House of Delegates and the Senate have different budgets, and they have a smaller group that tries to reconcile them. And I expect I'll be involved in that. And while that's a very enriching process, it's also an exhausting process. I'm very hopeful that it will be less contentious this year, but it is going to consume a lot of time. So one of the biggest challenges I have is just due to my own personal inadequacies, and that's time management.
Now, what about the Finance Committee? I understand it took you a while to become a member of that committee.
Woody, you have a very good memory. I often am amused when I look in the rearview mirror at my legislative career. I was the leader of the Senate before I ever got on the Senate Finance Committee, and it was always an anomaly to me. It used to be that the pathway to get on the Senate Finance Committee was one way, and that was seniority. You had to wait your time and pay your dues. We've gotten away from that a little bit, and I think that's a good thing. It was really brought into focus when my good friend, Senator William Wampler from Bristol, retired. Senator Wampler had been on the Finance Committee for many years and really was a voice of Southwest Virginia. When he retired, there was no one on the Finance Committee from Southwest Virginia. On reflection, I came to the conclusion that maybe seniority alone was not the sole criteria. It was unconscionable that we would think about disenfranchising all of Southwest Virginia merely on a theory of seniority. So I encouraged and backed Senator Bill Carrico, who replaced Senator Wampler from Southwest Virginia. I encouraged Senator Carrico to offer himself on the Senate Finance Committee. I remember when we presented the committee report on the floor that there was some significant pushback from my friends on the other side that it was unprecedented that a first-year freshman senator would go on Finance Committee. And I made the retort that we couldn't disenfranchise that whole part of Virginia. It was not right. So I think we've adjusted perhaps the tradition just a little bit. It's important that every geographical area of Virginia is represented. And just to show that we or myself were ecumenical, with the untimely death of former Senator Yvonne Miller, who represented Norfolk. She had been on the Finance Committee for many years and was a voice for that area of Virginia. Kenny Alexander was elected to fill her seat out of Norfolk, and I immediately put Kenny Alexander on the Senate Finance Committee. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I didn't hear the same pushback from my Democratic friends when we put Alexander on that I'd heard when we put the Republican Bill Carrico on, but it was consistency. It was the exact same approach that we needed geographical representation, and to disenfranchise the entire city of Norfolk, which is one of our largest population areas, just was not right.
Now, what about commerce and labor? It has a very broad jurisdiction, especially as that relates to business and economic interest.
I've been very fortunate and have been on the Commerce and Labor Committee for all 24 years that I've been in the General Assembly. My late dear friend and my mentor, Senator Hunter Andrews, who was, even though he was a Democrat, was a great friend and a great mentor to me. He was the majority leader and the chairman of finance when I was elected, and he was kind enough to place me on the Commerce and Labor Committee. We continue to deal with most important business issues, banking, insurance, workmen's compensation, unemployment, any significant legislation that touches on the business community comes before that committee. Right now, I am the senior ranking Republican on that committee, but my dear friend, who I'm going to miss enormously, Senator John Watkins, chairs that committee. Senator Watkins has done a wonderful job, very bright guy, very studious, very pro-business, and very commonsensical. So Senator Watkins has done a wonderful job, and I've appreciated the opportunity to serve under his leadership.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about a piece of legislation that you are carrying that was the result of some very negative publicity out of the University of Virginia regarding sexual assault.
There's no question. It has been a controversial piece of legislation, and it's been a troublesome piece of legislation, and I don't just mean the subject matter. What happened at the University of Virginia, I don't know that we could have prevented it with legislation, but once it has come out, particularly the young man who started at Christopher Newport, left Christopher Newport under a cloud of suspicions for misbehavior, went to Liberty University, left Liberty University on another cloud of concern, then was employed by the University of Virginia, and ends up allegedly having committed these horrible crimes. I heard on the news he was just indicted for first-degree murder this morning. A number of pieces of legislation. And it's not isolated to the University of Virginia and Rolling Stone magazine by any means. It's an issue and a problem that's been out there for a while. So we've put forward some very meaningful legislation to try to address those issues, but to also raise the public awareness of it. We want to be certain that the colleges are not trying to handle these sexual assaults on campus internally. It is not an internal administration or administrative, or as one administrator told me earlier this week, it's an educational experience. My daughter getting assaulted on a college campus is not an educational experience, and I defy it. So we put in legislation that if someone is suspended, dismissed from school as a result of a sexual assault, that will be put on their transcript, so if they try to transfer to another college or university, that next college and university will be aware of it. We've put together some other assessment teams that will deal with these sexual assaults, and I'm hoping the public awareness will improve the situation remarkably.
Thank you, Senator Tommy Norment. It's a pleasure seeing you again.
It's always good to be with you, Woody. It's a real hoot.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government.